You mentioned earlier that we should put up a statue of an abolitionist. Well, of course, there is the statue of Edmund Burke down there, right by where Colston's statue was. And he, of course, famously was elected as the MP for Bristol and then opposed the slave trade, which massively annoyed the merchant venturers.
He got booted
so
out,
he then, when he stood for election the next time, the merchant venturers made sure that he wasn't elected.
Well, I'd like to see one of the Methodists maybe put there. Anyway, look, the video is called Bristol's Illuminati or City Benefactors, the Society of Merchant Venturers, a Force for Good, ? On the Bristol Post website by Tristan Cork. And we're going to move on now to, you've been sitting there very patiently, Tony, listening to us waffle on about Bristol politics, really, with a Welshman. Well, a lot of the Welsh, as we were saying, do come over here to work, don't they? And Andy Burnham, who's another mayor, he's actually the mayor of Liverpool, Manchester, was on BBC Question Time last night. And I think we'll start off our discussion about South Wales Police and the general justice system by having listened to what he had to say about the post office scandal with the absolutely horrific attack on individuals from been operating post offices quite happily and peacefully and correctly for many years, didn't do anything wrong, but was slapped in jail for apparent fraud, which didn't actually happen. Now, quite clearly, somebody, somewhere, needs to pay for this in the terms of justice, but nobody has paid for it. And Andy Burnham had this to say on BBC Question Time last night, a rare, interesting moment on the appallingly chaired by the presenter from Antiques Roadshow. You couldn't make this stuff up, could you? But anyway, now and again they have a guest on there, or even sometimes one of the members of the audience that has something worthwhile to say.
Jake says it should never happen again. Of course, that's right, but it does. It does. This keeps on repeating the same pattern. The gentleman is right to say, will there be accountability? Well, I hope the inquiry gets to the truth. But all I can say, I work with the Hillsborough families, and we help them get to the truth after 30 years. But nobody held accountable for 97 unlawful deaths in that case. One small finding against Sheffield Wednesday Football Club, but that was it. And so, can we be sure that there will be accountability? No, we can't, because history will tell you that isn't what happens. It's too hard for working people in this country to fight for justice. It takes too long. The battle takes too much out of them. They have the original injustice, and then the battle for justice after it just completely takes so much out of them. Too hard for them to get justice. It's too easy for public and private bodies to cover up. And that is just a fact, because there are so many injustices, as Francis said.
So what would you do, Andy, to change that? So let me come to what
I would do, because I have a very specific remedy. If something needs levelling up in this country, it's the scales of justice, because they are weighed against ordinary people. Weighed against. Public bodies go to courtrooms and they hire the best QCs in the land. Bereaved families are often denied any legal support at all. What chance do they have when they're raw with grief going into those courtrooms? A Hillsborough law, Jake, which you have committed to as a government too, which would have a number of proposals that would rebalance the system. One, a duty of candour on public officials to tell the truth at the first opportunity. And if they did that and didn't cover up, they would spare people fighting for justice so much pain, so much grief, so much time spent in the wilderness lost. I just feel for these people who've been left in this situation. It is another stain on this country. But actually, what do? We come together and we say, a Hillsborough law now. Rebalance the scales of justice in favour of ordinary working people and ordinary families.
Good night.
Well, that's Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, speaking on BBC's Question Time. Tony Roach, as a former police officer in middle of Cardiff, doing an excellent job. What do you make of what you just heard?
He's spot on. It's everything what he's saying. It's all geared round the person who haven't got the financial clout or whatever. You're fighting big organisations and you haven't got a clue. You know, how they operate. And, you know, I've written to the Prime Minister, Priti Patel, and then it goes down the chain to the Home Office, the IOPC, and then the IOPCs turn on and give it my complaint to South Wales Police, PSD, the ones who arrested me unlawfully, to investigate themselves.
Well, one does wonder whether some of these complaints and information just goes into the shredder, actually, because I myself have been sending information about vaccine injuries and the failures. We had a chap from Wales talking about the supply chain of the Covax jabs having absolutely no quality control over it whatsoever. He's a professional in the field. I sent that to my MP, Thangam Debonair, nearly a month ago now. And I've just written to her again saying, what, have you received this? No reply at all. Now, this is all clear evidence of, you would think that politicians would be interested in, something if the pharmaceutical industry was peddling something, which was dangerous and putting it into people's arms and had no proper quality control. You would think that was an MP's job to do it, but she can't even reply. You've had a similar experience.
Yes, I've gone to my local MP, Mr. Alan Carnes. He was the Secretary of State for Wales. I took another officer who's also was dismissed by this Richard Lewis, and he was in charge or head of the professional standards, PSD. So when we had this meeting just before Christmas, I asked Mr. Carnes if he'd write to Alan Michael, and my concerns was ACC Lewis was involved.
As Assistant Chief Constable, yeah.
Yes, that's right, and the evidence we've got. But no, more concerning, I also informed my MP, Mr. Carnes, South Wales Police used, it seems, like an undercover officer purporting to be a HMRC investigator in an interview. 2 police interviews. And that was in March 2014. We've contacted HMRC, who said, no, we didn't get involved in your case until August or September 2014. I've asked Mr. Carnes to write to Alan Michael, a commissioner, because we want the notes which this Mr. Greg Jones, that was the name he gave. We've also got a picture of him and a copy of the CD interview. And it was found out then that I said to Alan Carnes, can you give me a copy of the letter you're going to send to Alan Michael, the commissioner? He did send it, and not once did he mention the HMRC undercover officer. And that's somebody purporting to be a government official.
Well, look, I mean, this sounds to me, it's got the whiff of corruption, and you could spend hours and hours talking about various bits of paper going this way and that way. But look, what we know is that you were booted out of doing an excellent job. I'd just like to hear a little bit now, if you don't mind, about your work in Cardiff City Centre, what you were actually able to do, and how you saw crime manifesting around you, in front of you, particularly the nightclub scene and the nighttime scene, and how you managed to actually stop it. Because I feel like sometimes we need to be telling some of the senior police officers and some of the mid-ranking police officers, well, actually, this is your job. Will you please just get on and do it? So just explain to us what you were doing over the years in Cardiff City Centre.
Listen, Tony, I keep saying I was well respected, even by senior officers, and I enjoyed the job. It was very stressful, and I will tell you, I'd have chief superintendents coming up to me. I'm only a PC, and what was good, because I was so good at my job, they're asking me for advice on what I can do, and we got a problematic premises here. And like I said, I
think probably without naming names of specific premises, what were you seeing, and how were you shutting the crime down?
It could be various things. It could be glass ins in there, loads of assaults. Some premises, they'd have DPS, that's a designated supervisor in the premises. They weren't up to the job.
What does that mean?
They're like a landlord. And like I said, if they weren't managing the place properly, we get the area managers down, and everything worked well. And we had an excellent relationship with all of them, the door staff, the lot.
So were you ever threatened doing that job?
Yes. Before I was unlawfully arrested, and there's documents here, Tony, where you see Barry Kerslake, a DI, and they...
That's a detective inspector, yeah?
Yes, sorry. I was coming out of a meeting, and this one fella... who's we know now he's a criminal informant. He's filming me and trying to goad me, and then we walked to this premises because obviously he told loads of lies. And then he started threatening me, and also in that pub, I could see there was loads of PSD officers in there, which I thought
this is strange. The Professional Standards Department officers, right? Okay, they're the guys who can sack you.
That's right, and they were in there, and then I've now obtained a statement from this guy who said I was contacted by DI Barry Kerslake to give him a copy of the video of this meeting. I was threatened in front of my colleague by him. We went straight back to the police station. I put a report in, and that went electronic, and then a PSD turned on to say, we never received it.
Right, this is the people who are supposed to be looking after standards within the police. So anyway, when you were threatened, who are you threatened by? Is this people that were eventually to give evidence against you that got you removed from your job?
No, they were involved in police stings with the police. I've also obtained a video where certain people got assaulted in an office, and that was another police sting. The person who owned the company made a complaint to Alan Michael and Peter Vaughan. And
sorry, when you say it's a police sting, the idea of a police sting is to actually entrap people into a crime that might not otherwise take place. Is that right? I mean, that's actually, I mean, that sort of thing, surely. I mean, I know this from the world of journalistic stings, the sort of stuff that Roger Cook used to do on the Cook Report. This has to be signed off at the very highest level in order to do that, because, of course, what you're doing is you're getting someone to do something that they might not otherwise have done, and then saying, right, you're nicked.
Yeah. Like I said, Tony, I was targeted, and this was an 18-month operation. Now, if they couldn't get me for 18 months for anything, they were trying anything and anything. And I've got the paperwork, and every time I've tried to make a complaint to the professional standards, I've got strong evidence. And as you know, Tony, I've made 2 videos on YouTube, and it's the first time an Assistant Chief Constable, Mark Travers, he wrote to me, because obviously he's concerned, and he's obviously wants to put my concerns, and he's written a letter to me, and he said, during the service, former Deputy Chief Constable Richard Lewis never had command of control of professional standards. DC Lewis never had any role.
Yeah, well, they'll make up any old excuse, won't they? I mean, this is what happens when you get a kind of tribal system developing, whether it's in a city council or in the police force, is that people are loyal to their mates rather than loyal to, say, the Crown or the job they're supposed to be doing. Anyway, I want to just get back to your, you on the beat in Cardiff, and just give us an idea of what an ordinary night would be like for you out there.
I could go in, I could work. I've done a lot of split shifts, night shifts, obviously, for the nighttime economy. I'd be linking...
Because this is one complaint we get all the time, isn't it? That we just don't see the police anymore.
That's right. And obviously
What were you doing? Hiding behind a pillar on it?
No. My job was to reduce crime and disorder, to make it better for the officers on the street. And, the action plans, I was well respected.
So were you in uniform when you were out about? Were you out and about in Cardiff in the evenings, or was your work more during the day, clearing up the mess?
Yeah, no, a lot of my work, it was undercover, because there's nothing, obviously, if I'm going in the middle of the night, walking in a rowdy pub in a uniform on my own, which I was on my own many a time, you're subject to be threatened yourself. So a lot of my work was plain clothes.
Yeah. Okay, so, but you were actually very successful. Can you just give us an idea? You talked about this right at the very beginning, a little bit about how, you were actually eroding this whole criminal activity in the city centre, the violence and that sort of thing. I imagine a lot of it is to do with drugs, as we know much of the violence is to do with drugs. So what kind of inroads and over what period of time did you manage to achieve?
I went in there in 2008, and, very challenging position, but there's loads of drugs, there's loads of unsavoury,
okay, what sort of drugs mainly in Cardiff? What's the problem?
It could be anything: cocaine, heroin, everything, cannabis, the lot. And obviously, the door staff worked well with us, and if anything was seized, it goes straight into a drug safe.
Right, well, you yourself were accused of stealing those drugs from the drug safe, weren't you?
Yes, that's another allegation I was put against me. And like I said, the policy with the drugs, if a door staff or anybody takes any drugs off any person, they'd seize them, they'd get obviously packaged up and they go into a drug safe. There's only one key for every single drug safe in Cardiff, and we never ever had the key to that. It was always a uniform bobby in Cardiff Central.
Oh, okay. So, well, but sorry, some of the door staff, surely they might take these drugs, seize these drugs, and then pass them to another dealer to sell to someone else.
Well, maybe if that intelligence came, obviously what we do, we look at the CCTV, etc. But from my time in there, everything worked fine.
Okay, well, so let's paint a picture of, Cardiff doing a little bit better, a little bit of a safer place to go out in the evenings in the city centre. When were you taken off that job, and what happened afterwards then?
Well, I was arrested and I didn't know. I was suffering with stress and everything in work at the time.
Why? What stress?
Work overload. I was only police officer in a small team. My sergeant put numerous requests for additional staff. But obviously...
So you were basically the gopher, the dog's body, the one out on the street, whereas someone else was ordering you around from in the office.
That's right. And, I ended up taking paperwork home. We had time scales. So not only that, then I get accused, or I get arrested on the 20th of January by this DI Kerslake. And could have knocked
me... For your trouble, yeah.
That's right. And I was told I might end up going to prison, which will stay with me for the rest of my life.
Well, this is a way of putting the frighteners on you, I suppose, isn't it? It's the sort of thing the gangsters do. So what about what happened to Cardiff City Centre after that?
I was dismissed on the Friday. ACC Richard Lewis, the Assistant Chief Constable, put 2 additional police officers in that department.
Finally.
Yes, exactly. we were crying out for them. And 2 of them, one of them transferred to another department. He was finding it too stressful. Another 2 then, they were in there, and I know they've been on a sick for 18 months and 12 months, the other one. And I'm also in touch with, obviously, a lot of police officers, because I am respected. And they said, obviously, the one officer, he won't be coming back. He's finding the work too hard. So, but more important to that, Tony, after the 6 months, when he put 2 additional police officers in that department, he went to the Wales media and he said, and I've got a copy of that, the licensing department in Cardiff is the busiest per square mile for licensed premises and they can't cope with all the work. And I thought, well, that was like another knife in my stomach.
Why?
Well, when I went to the misconduct, the only offence I would say I'd done, I was suffering with stress in work.
And that's because you had far too much to do.
That's right.
So I suppose now, what's happening with Cardiff City Centre now? Is it as safe as it was when you were there?
I would say, speaking to a lot of door staff, licensees, they all tell me it's all changed. It's not the same. None of us work together. And of course,
the police are actually a link between the different clubs, aren't they? And
that's right.
And the door staff.
Yeah.
The door staff need to know that they've got somebody that they can trust, that they can talk to, and to make sure that when there are violent individuals around, that they're dealt with and that they're noted and that they're on the CCTV or whatever, and that they're not allowed. So, I get the impression now that Cardiff is a bit of a free for all.
Well, like I said, Tony, I spoke to numerous licensees, door staff, officers. And they said the licensing department has changed since I've gone. It's not the same, and it's far worse than what it was.
Well, one of the reasons we're talking to Tony tonight is because I noticed there was a meeting taking place very soon with one of, actually it's the one we're about to hear from, Deborah Thomas, who's Di Morris's sister. Di Morris was wrongfully arrested for another miscarriage of justice. This is the Clydach murders in 1999, and he died last year in prison. These miscarriages of justice are doing rather too many of them seem to be taking place these days. The public meeting is on Monday the 7th of March, and it's in central Cardiff, and I'll give the details after this. But anyway, let's have a listen now to Deborah Thomas, who I spoke to about her brother, Di Morris, who died in prison for a crime he didn't commit last year, the Clydach murders, and they were particularly horrific. So let's have a listen to Deborah now and what she has to say about not just her case, but other miscarriages of justice that have simply not been dealt with and causing basically running sores in communities across South Wales.
was very difficult because we're up against the police. But, I mean, there's so many inconsistencies in the police role in my brother's conviction. You know, we can prove that they've lied, but we're up against a massive force. It's just us against them. And they're doing everything, you know, they can't. I mean, they've announced that they were going to do forensic testing. We asked for transparency. There's been no transparency at all. They've said there was a connection with some forensic findings they found with a sock that was used to where they wore the sock when they were holding the pole to murder this innocent family. They said there's a link, a probability that it was my brother's. They refused to hand over that forensic report. We know nothing about what they tested. All they're saying about is the sock when we gave them a list of items we wanted testing. We asked if we could oversee, our forensic expert oversee what they were doing, what testing they were doing. There was none of it. There was none of that at all. We know nothing about what was tested. We don't know any techniques. We know absolutely nothing about what's in that report. South Wales Police are notorious for their miscarriage of justice. They're absolutely notorious. And yes, I've spoken to her, and I've obviously got involved with a lot of other families of miscarriage of justice. They are absolutely notorious for the miscarriage of justice. There was the Cardiff 3, the Cardiff 5, the Lynette, the Cardiff 5 was the Lynette White case, Annette Ewins. I forget off the top of my head now, but they've got quite a few miscarriage of justice under their belt. The Darvell brothers and the sex shop murder. There's so many miscarriage of justice that's gone on with South Wales Police. So many. The Lynette White case, for a start. I mean, one of the officers, Coots, involved in that case, and all the wrongdoings that went on in that case was the same police officer involved in my brother's case. Now, that case collapsed because paperwork went missing, and miraculously then, after it had collapsed, they found the paperwork. How incompetent are they, or is it deliberate?
Well, isn't it appalling when your local police force become evil, become the enemy? So anyway, Deborah Thomas, thank you very much for joining us. Just like to reiterate that the meeting is with the politician Neil McAvoy on Tuesday the 7th of March at 169, that's ONE, and the number 69, 169 Bar and Kitchen in Cardiff, and that starts at 7:30. Tickets are £10, and you get a little bit bite to eat as well. And also, you get to do something about the horrific miscarriages of justice that have been going on in South Wales. Deborah Thomas, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, yes, that's Deborah speaking to me earlier this week. And just to reiterate, that is on Monday, the 7th of March, in central Cardiff, a miscarriages of justice public meeting, but particularly talking about these horrific Clydach murders where the guy who was wrongfully convicted for it died last year in jail, Di Morris, and it's quite clear that, in fact, you can hear the full interview if you'd like to, with Deborah up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk, which I'll put up online later. But I mean, Deborah's saying there, Tony, look, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's actually lots and lots of nasty stuff been going on in South Wales, and the police are simply brushing it under the carpet because maybe they're protecting their friends.
Listen, Tony, what I've been through, and it's not all about me, it's, I don't want this out there because I've looked at the recent programme Murder in the Valleys, and as an experienced police officer, it seems, and parallel obviously to mine, South Wales Police professional standards will only investigate things which they want. And it's disgusting, and this has got to stop. They're on about honest integrity and everything, but what they've probably done is they're shutting members of the public down. They've tried to shut me down, but obviously I know the law, and I've given them concrete evidence, and Chief Inspector Steve Grodver, in the professional standards, have refused to form any sort of investigation. When I had that letter from the Assistant Chief Constable Mark Travis, I've written to him. I even left a message on his voicemail in headquarters. And I said, can we have a non-confrontational meeting? Because you've written me this letter. And, you know, as an experienced and well-respected police officer, I think he should have the courtesy to meet up with me. But I get a letter then from Steve Grother, the Chief Constable, Jeremy Vaughan of Saltways Police, and Mark Travis, the Assistant Chief Constable. They don't want to see your evidence, and they've refused to meet you. Now, that's a police officer with 18 years service, excellent service. So what are they doing to the public? You know?
Yeah, it's pretty frightening, actually. You're talking there about murder in the valleys. I hadn't noticed this, but this is last week. ITV did a full programme about what they call the true story of the Clydach murders, Wales's biggest police investigation, supposedly, where the police are investigating the police and then finding the police not guilty of this horrific murder in Clydach. But Martin Summers, I mean, you and I spoke, didn't we, many years ago? I mean, we heard a little bit about Hillsborough from Andy Burnham to Tony Farrell, who was in Barnsley Police at the time. He was chatting to people who said that actually this guy, David Duckenfield, who was at Hillsborough, who was found not guilty of anything, apparently, I mean, unbelievably, after he finally was brought to trial, that he was supposed to be in charge of policing that Hillsborough match, but when he saw that people were being crushed, rather than do something, order gates to be opened and that sort of thing, apparently he was, according to Tony, he was under the table a gibbering wreck, and he just did nothing. And for that, he's been found not guilty. So that's apparently what a responsible public servant does when something goes wrong, is they crawl under the table and they start gibbering.
Well, I mean, the police's job is a very difficult job, and not everybody is cut out to do it. And of course, they get things wrong. I mean, we've just been hearing about all things that they've got wrong.
But their instinct seems to be cover up.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it? You've got to recognise that. I mean, when Sir Robert Mark became head of the Metropolitan Police in the 1970s, he gave a press conference. He said, well, the bad news is that a third of my officers are criminals. They're corrupt. The good news is we know who they are and we're keeping an eye on them. And that is the reality of policing.
But couldn't they sack them?
Well, no, because they're trained police officers. Yeah. So they know how to protect themselves. And people shouldn't be surprised by that. That's the way of the world. The question is, are you tackling it? Yeah. That's the question.
Well, the other thing, of course, Tony Roach, is this idea of policing by consent. Now, obviously, you can't build trust and confidence with the public when you've got these miscarriages of justice building up further and further. At some point, there needs to be, a change. There needs to be some justice, and some of these corrupt police officers need to go behind bars. Is that ever going to happen?
No, it's not going to happen because a lot of, especially in my case and other cases, there's a lot of senior Saltways police officers, which I can evidence, and they know it, and this is why they will not meet up with me and see the evidence. Now, if you've got a force who's got a record of miscarriage of justices, would you want a serving or ex-serving police officer putting that out there?
Well, surely in this situation, now we've seen actually ITV and the BBC have done actually quite a good job here in putting out documentaries. Apparently there was one from Sky as well about the corruption in South Wales Police. So, that they are kind of the world's last court of appeal. But these are not coming to court, are they?
No, it's, you'll see it, like I said, I've just said to you, Tony, I've got evidence, and I get a letter back from the ACC. No, and Steve Grother, the Chief Inspector, has refused to investigate. I told you I went down, I think it was in September, to get my master copy tapes of my interviews, and they obstructed me, and then next minute I get a letter from the Professional Standard saying you're not going to see them.
So do you ever feel like you're dealing with a gang?
Well, it is a gang. It's a gang who's used, and I can evidence in my case, as linked in with criminal informants, entrapments and everything, just trying to get the end result. Well, of course, 18 months, I wasn't convicted with any criminal offences whatsoever. I was dismissed for very, very minor misconduct, and I can evidence my mitigation of evidence, Saltways Police withheld. Same as like that lady was saying now with the Di Morris. Evidence, and the Lynette White, evidence goes missing. And, it's disgusting. And people in South Wales, they have not got public confidence. There needs to be a massive review in South Wales Police.
So who's supposed to sort this out? The Police and Crime Commissioner. They are supposed to be the last, almost like the last place for somebody like you or I, if I were a victim of crime, victim of police corruption, to go to sort things out.
I've tried to get an appeal against my dismissal. The paperwork and the regulations entitle me to. And I've given that to South Wales Police Commissioner, Alan Michael, and he's made it up as he goes along. Just come back and said, under the provisions, you can't have a second appeal. So I've said, well, give me these...
Well, have you already had an appeal?
I did one a month after. I had to put it in, but I wasn't a well person. I ended up under the crisis mental health. But at that time, Tony, I didn't know Assistant Chief Constable and Gary Osborne were heavily involved.
So you've got some new evidence. So hang on a minute. It sounds to me like even the police commissioner is part of the cover-up.
Well, he is.
So hang on, what's going... I can remember years ago doing a debate, a discussion over in Cardiff, I think it was at the college, as part of a TV course, which was with one of the senior local Freemasons. Now, something is going on here, isn't it? If you've got the police commissioner plus the police officers themselves colluding to defraud the public, effectively, which is perversion of the course of justice. These are all very serious offences, but they seem to be confident enough that they can bypass the law to keep people like you out of a job. So, is it? I mean, have you got any evidence, or have you heard any rumours about Freemasonry? Because they're well known as targeting the police.
Listen, Tony, the evidence I got is damning, and I've asked to meet the Commissioner.
But what about the Masons? Is any evidence for that, or is this just me speculating?
It's probably, I don't know whether it's you speculating. A lot of people do say, with the Masons, a lot of people say if you want justice, you've got to, in South Wales, you've got to go over the other side of the bridge. With my case, I went to an employment tribunal. South Wales Police wanted it stalled. And next minute, they get a different judge in, and obviously I've been hijacked again, withheld all the evidence. Alan Michael has spent, now, he says that one of his policies is to spend your money wisely. He has spent on Operation Kansas with 3 different police forces. Operation Kansas relates to me. He has spent, estimated, £1.5–2 million. When I asked him for that costing, he won't give it, because he knows that money should have been spent on frontline policing. And then eventually I had a freedom of information from South Wales Police. They said, it only cost $23,000. Alan Michael has also said ACC Lewis have never been, his portfolio has never been head of professional standards. I've got documents here where professional standards specially selected Assistant Chief Constable Richard Lewis, and more concerning than that, another officer's made a complaint because Richard Lewis, the ex-Assistant Chief Constable, he retired 2 years ago, and he put his CV on LinkedIn, and it would show he was head of Special Operations, Professional Standards. When the officer made a complaint, funny enough, it's taken down. But obviously, loads of people have got copies of that.
Oh, right.
They've colluded and covered up.
Yeah, so he's put something on LinkedIn. He's realised, oh gosh, this is evidence that could be used against me, and he's just taken it off of there. I mean, this is amazing, really, isn't it? And I think be nice to sum up with if you could change things. If you were, you had the ear of Priti Patel and she was actually listening, which would be a minor miracle. How things need to change.
Well, I've written to the Police Federation, and the Federation, they will not speak to me in South Wales.
Gosh, that's another one, isn't it? They should be helping.
They're my union. I was a fully paid member, but they know it's a hot potato because they know there's numerous senior South Wales police officers involved of corruption in my case. And the last email I had last week from the Federation was from an officer in South Wales. We're not speaking to you. It's being dealt with up in Leatherhead headquarters. I've asked who that person's dealing with. They will not come back and speak to me. And that's a frustrating people trying to get justice.
Yeah, well, you're being shut out from justice, Tony. Well done for sort of soldiering on and carrying on and seeing, what you could do about this. But meanwhile, we're having to cope with an increasing, cancer, basically, in South Wales, where the police is becoming less and less reliable. And, of course, this is what happened here in Bristol with the Lloyds Bank Business Support Unit, is once you've got corruption in the police, once one or two police become either bribable or in one way or another, maybe they're taking favours in kind, maybe they're in a secret society with somebody in Lloyds Bank, God knows. But once this starts to happen, then the criminals get attracted to that area and they think, oh, right, well, we're safe around here. We can do pretty much whatever we want.
Well, like I said, Tony, the Professional Standards Department, it's double or trebled in the last few years. And we're talking experienced.
Yeah, it's doubled and trebled alongside the descent of professional standards to the gutter.
That's right. So if they deal with corruption, why haven't they dealt with corruption within their own force?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Maybe a good way to leave it. Anyway, how do people follow your story, Tony? I know there have been quite a few bits and pieces in the news in South Wales press about your plight. So how what's the best way to follow what you're up to?
Yeah, it's just on YouTube at the moment, but I'm in the middle of writing a book which the author of the Cluddock murders, John Morris, I've been in touch with him. It's coming out the end of this year. I am naming the officers because I can evidence everything I'm saying, and he said to me this book is going to be dynamite.
Well, let's just hope so. And hopefully dynamite underneath the corrupt officers. And, this is the thing, Martin, isn't it? Is once this corruption starts, then actually it's almost like a lie. It continues and continues, almost, and grows as well.
Well, obviously, once you started on, the descent into the gutter, as it were, then the protection is going to be in there. And, it's going to be an ongoing struggle. You've got to recognise that. There's always going to be injustices like this because it's part of the way, it's part of the way crime is. But the question is, what are you doing about it?
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like to finish, Martin. It's true what you say, but when South Wales Police are guilty of so many miscarriages of justice and the senior officers have refused, they're prepared to write to you, but they refuse to see the evidence. That's concerning, and I think members of the public as well.
Well, as you know, in the past, they used to send in officers from other forces to investigate forces, and that used to be the check and balance, if insofar as there was.
But I think there has always been this problem within the police, hasn't there, Martin? Ever since I can remember, where the police just cannot be trusted to investigate themselves.
Well, it's bound to be a problem, isn't it? I mean, who's going to guard the guardians? That's always going to be an issue.
Exactly. Who's policing the police? And like I said, as a good officer, I've written to Priti Patel, and what is she doing about this?
Absolutely nothing, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on politicians, including Priti Patel, to be seen to be pro-police. Yeah, so that then leads to a situation where they don't want to wash dirty linen in public and all the rest of it.
Well, they should.
There's a lot of that going on here, for sure.
They should be washing that dirty linen behind the scenes, then, shouldn't they?
You've got to deal with it one way or another, and you've got to accept that it's not. It doesn't mean the end of the police as an institution to say that some people are not doing their jobs properly. It's not attacking the police as such, is it?
It's leaning towards the American model, isn't it, of policing with these commissioners, and the idea is that if you could just control one person, the crooks, the criminals. Well, I mean,
I was opposed to electing police and crime commissioners, and that we had the Police Federation people coming in saying, well, we don't want to do it like this because it makes either they got no power at all, or they're going to interfere on a day-to-day basis. And if they're interfering on a day-to-day basis, then that's political control. And if they're not doing that, then what are they doing,
Well, can I just end by there, Mart? You're true what you're saying there, and that's the thoughts of everybody. Alan Michael, apparently he's got 49 members of staff working in his office. It's all been refurbished a couple of years ago. And like you said, that money could be spent. I think I don't agree with police commissioners. The other thing is, I've even got documentation, which I've had now from South Wales Police, where the commissioner has also been involved in my investigation, and that's another reason why he will not give me an appeal, which I'm allowed to, because he knows his senior officers have committed serious corruption.
Well, it's supposed to be his job to sort it out, and quite clearly he's not doing anything. Anyway, on to another police investigation now, and that is into Prince Charles's charity, and Prince Charles himself being, well, I don't know about arrested, but certainly interviewed. The probe will assess claims of a cash for honours scandal involving a Saudi businessman. The British police have launched an investigation into Prince Charles's charitable foundation. The decision follows an assessment.